This is The Final Word with Geoff Lennon and Adam Collins. We are very happy to be joined by Nagraj Gollapudi, who is the ESPNCricinfo news editor, ear to the ground. There aren't too many quiet and relaxed weeks in terms of the politics of Indian cricket, Nagraj, but the last week has probably been less quiet and less relaxed than most others.
Yeah, very quiet. Nothing happened, right? Nothing at all happened. Then it started happening last Wednesday. I'm not sure how to describe it. I mean, like I was telling you guys earlier, it's just the chaos and confusion which is always prevailing. But for some reason, it has shifted to cricket for once during the Patodi Trophy. It was so engrossing, so enthralling, and we were talking about spells of bowling. I wouldn't use the word T20 word matchup, but there was a matchup happening between Bumrah and the certain batters and Joe Root, the way he kind of just was in command. And I was just like looking forward to how is he going to seal this series, in a sense. How is he going to finish this series? Like he had such a big record on the cusp of such a big record of becoming the first batsman doing whatever number of runs, gazillion amount of runs. Yeah. And then what actually I felt I blame the ECB is that why were there no guidelines dropped? Why were there certain defined boundaries? There were no defined boundaries, and that kind of led to this such a chaos. And it started with the head coach, Indian head coach testing positive first, and then moved on to an assistant physio testing positive, and that's when the players got rattled. And you know the whole story now.
How is it being perceived, because it's very easy for this to become something that goes along nationalist lines, that people in England were pretty keen to be annoyed at the Indian team, it was their fault. Then power brokers in India are pretty keen to take offence at that sort of thing and turn it into a you against us against them kind of situation. And lost in the middle of it is the actual story about what actually happened.
True, but what all you said, especially us against them, etc., we still don't know. That's a perception. That's an outside perception, not an inside one. What really happened, and even I wouldn't know and you wouldn't know till we are one of the players, and the players really, we trust the players. But it is clear that the players put their foot down. It is clear that close to midnight on, was the test starting on Friday?
Friday, yeah.
Yes. So close to midnight on Thursday, the decision was made that you're packing your bags and you're leaving. And that was only because BCCI was left with no choice, because the players said, we can't play. And there were multiple reasons. The biggest one was obviously the mental thing, the fear that what if another person suffers and what happens then? What do you want to do? How are you going to treat the situation? And they got rattled. And once they got rattled, they came together. And they addressed, I just feel this is I'm just basing it on what I have heard, is like they came together and they confronted the BCCI and said, look, we can't play. And when your senior players, and which includes your leadership group, let's not take names, but you know who they are, say, I can't play, or I'm highly reluctant to play unless, and ECB is trying, like Tom Harrison was saying, that we tried every possible way to see, is there anything that we can put in place to mitigate the circumstance? There is nothing. What do you do with a closed dressing room at Old Trafford? How do you address that? There's nothing, nowhere else. Are you going to make the players sit outside in the stands? No, the stands are full. So what are you going to do? How do you address that? So these are kind of questions that came through the mind of the players, and then they said, look, this is what we can.
Yeah, Yeah, so when Geoff and I last talked about this on Friday, probably within an hour and a half of the cancellation of the test match, the conclusion we arrived at was that the players and the BCCI made the rational evaluation that if any player tested positive, they'd be stuck in the UK. Public Health England guidelines would have them stuck here for 10 more days, and that would not only leave them isolated in the UK, but would mean they wouldn't get back in time for the Indian Premier League. So that gave fuel to the fire. It's all the IPL. It's the big beast that's the IPL that's ruining this final test match. And if you want to dig around some of the forums online, which I do periodically around county cricket, that's the strong message, and a number of former players have sort of said the same. Would it be reasonable to say that this wasn't about the IPL, but to ignore that it was at least a small input or a driving factor, that if they got stuck here, they could miss some of the IPL? You can't completely divorce that either. That it's a little bit of the puzzle, but it's not the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, you can't entirely blame the IPL, but it is the IPL that kind of also was in the background. If the IPL was starting a week later, you would have the test match played, correct? So it's simple as that. It's the tight window. You couldn't do anything about it. And the most important thing, I just feel that from the BCCI's point of view, money and all is obviously there, but because even ECB is thinking money right now to hold that and conduct that match or extra T20s or whatever to cover up for the losses. But for the BCCI, I felt it's more from the UAE government's point of view. If you have someone positive coming into the country, you have tight restrictions there within the UAE, and then that they don't want that to have an impact on the T20 World Cup, because it's they've had various kinds of discussions around what this bubble would be for these two tournaments, and they don't want to have an impact. Franchises themselves started messaging me saying that, how did this happen? Because they were worried how some of these guys are going to enter the 5-6 franchises who had their players. They were going to enter their bubble. They've already worked hard to clear the bubble. And something happens if XYZ player goes into the franchise and tests positive tomorrow, that's news. Regardless of how you address the situation, it's news, and it is bad news. And BCCI doesn't want that bad news to happen on the eve of the World Cup. I feel those are the things. But I just want to know what the ECB felt. I don't know what you guys, I'm sure how the ECB thought, how the ECB looked at it when they were talking to the players of the BCCI. Do you guys, have you had a word with any of them, the top bosses there?
Well, I think you can read a fair bit from Tom Harrison's comments. Really, he's been a fairly open book on this. They're blindsided by it, but the idea of guidelines being there to oversee what's safe living. I mean, you were spot on before in how you put it. How did we end up in a situation where it wasn't set out very clearly what safe living meant, which could have eliminated some of the risk? And we go back to the book launch, and we've talked a lot about the book launch already, and perhaps we won't back over it now. But Mal Con was tweeting during the week. Nagraj, I'm sure you saw what Mal had to say when he was working with Cricket Australia last year before he came back and started working as a journalist again. And according to Mal, Ravi Shastri's attitude towards mask wearing and generally the COVID provisions when India were in Australia was fairly lax. That is, he thought that he could kind of run his own race. So it's not entirely out of step with his personality that he would take a fairly liberal interpretation to safe living, thus the book launch. And if that was the catalyst and the start of the chain reaction, I think that the ECB are right to think that deserves a bit of scrutiny. Whether Tom Harrison was there or not, by the way, it sort of doesn't really matter who else was there. It was the players inside of that environment and the members of the team inside that environment who have to wear responsibility, I think, for the decisions they made at that time.
Yeah, it's true. But at the same time, I think Shastri, apparently in Australia, and I was not there, you were there, I'm guessing. So you guys are there. Yeah. You are closer to and what the rules were. And I think they were far more stricter compared to what Indian team experienced because they couldn't move around on certain places and they had to be restricted. And that's what they really felt. These are people who might not have a sense of entitlement, but they are they kind of feel that they need certain kind of freedom. And you can expect that an elite athlete does need that kind of time to break away and not think cricket. And they were traveling from the IPL. So yes, as a head coach, he had his responsibility to stand by his players and try and fight for whatever it is. Even if it comes across as not inappropriate behavior in that sense, responding to the Brisbane government saying that you can't break these rules, and Indian BCCI saying that we're threatening that we'll pull out of the tour. Wasn't there a talk like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, well, at the very end, it was to do with a number of threats were issued. Carefully placed stories were issued about the tour not proceeding, and they got there in the end. It was all fine, and of course we know how that story ends. But yeah, I wonder, just to back over something you said before about the players driving this decision, not so much the BCCI and the fact that they went to the organisation. That interests me. So player strength, but also the fact that from a BCCI perspective, administratively, they would have been quite happy for this test to go ahead. It was the players who were really pushing back and saying we rather not.
It's the fear. That's what I just said. I just go back to that. I think the players would have played the test. It's they wanted to win the series, right? Or whatever it is, they wanted to. They would have played, even if an understrength Indian side would have played it, and they would have they had enough players to cover up, even if there were some of the top guys who were suffering from niggles, and one or two could have been rested for the final test, including Bumrah, I thought, would not play that test match. So it would have been an interesting test match to watch. Who would have it? England could have drawn the series. But it's the thing that is coming to me from this episode, and this could just become a sort of pattern, or I don't know whether the having of a new kind of player power. I just feel that this is the first time I'm seeing players in Indian cricket coming together in a way after a long time to push and collectively say that we are tired. You need to understand our issues. If you remember when Kohli left in June, on June 1st or 2nd, I think it was the second, when he gave the press conference before leaving for the World Test Championship final, he was asked a question about the mental workload, right? In addition to the physical, whatever workload you have, playing the World Test Championship final, followed by the England tour, followed by IPL, followed by a never-ending a conveyor belt of cricket. He said that at some point we are going to break, and people have to take measures. And now they've taken it in their own hands. That look, we feel this is a situation we need to address, and boards need to address too, and boards need to consider that. And that's what Tom Harrison said, that we are playing too much cricket, even if he's just like putting a band-aid on something, a wound that they created in a way, partially. They have played a hand in creating this wound. I don't see how this will be resolved if in bigger series. I mean, like we have Ashes coming up, it'll be interesting to see 5-match series again, how they cope with that. If something similar happens.
Ultimately, what they've won, these players, is a few days respite. That's about it. It's not like they've won themselves a whole lot of time off that grind. They have to keep going back into it. It is interesting that there's no players' union in India. The Australian Cricketers Association is a big part of the political landscape of the sport in Australia. They're an influential body. There's no representative body, equivalent body for Indian players. Does something like this hint at the beginnings of some sort of collective bargaining power, or is it just that a few players at the moment have enough power that they have the clout to make the BCCI listen to them?
Yes, I think it's a temporary one. Till Kohli is there in this, I don't know when the next generation will think differently. Right now, Kohli has been talking about this for a while. He's been saying that that's why in the last year or two, you see certain players not playing marquee series. So, and I guess the pandemic has come to kind of help also. You have the best all-rounders in the world like Stokes sitting down, and I heard that was it Kohli who got surprised totally that, wow, Ben Stokes talking mental health in that sense, right? Because you can see that this is the best athlete in the world cricket, and he's saying that I need time off. So there is something serious happening here, and I think, I don't know, this is a potential dangerous situation for all boards. David Warner pulls out of Ashes again. Let's see. I'm taking an example, or a Steve Smith pulls out. That has a big impact on a marquee tournament. So administrators really need to figure out, I mean, how they're going to do this. Okay, they might say this is a temporary thing. We are going to live with the pandemic anyway, which is going to become hopefully endemic at some point, and then we'll carry on. Life will be as normal. But I think this is also a chance for world players to kind of get together. I've always been surprised that why captains can't get together and have a word with each other and bring that to the ICC.
Yeah, that's certainly how it's meant to be, isn't it? The captains are meant to sort of run the game, but it seldom feels like they do in practice. We thought it was going to be a test match on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Lawrence has a story on Monday saying it's going to be 2 T20 internationals instead. Did you see that story? That it's going to be an offer of two. So
I think I've read in now this morning, and even BCCI saying something like that.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm asking is, how do you interpret that you know, it goes from being, we'll replace your test match, and now it's like, philosophically, what does that mean? What are we really saying? That, you know, what does this mean in terms, I suppose you can take that as you want, really, but it felt like a fairly big intervention to move it from a test match to a T20.
Well, I think that was part of the discussion. It's like it happened on that between those less than 24 hours between Wednesday evening, in fact 12 hours between Wednesday and Thursday mid-afternoon or something. These discussions were happening between ECB and BCCI that how do we do this? If BCCI had made up its mind, it had made up its mind as soon as it got the feeling from the players that they're not going to play, right? So then they started moving to the next step, and that's where they got stuck at. And these discussions were happening between those two boards saying that, well, how do we do this now? I'm losing this money. So the first step is it's very easy. Just add 2 T20s. It's very easy. It's just you have to, and T20 cricket will get you a lot of more money and the broadcasters will be happy, etc. But it is more, for me, the question is about the fans, right? They wanted, they paid, they looked at this test match months in advance or maybe a year in advance, and they booked their tickets, they've made their summer schedule accordingly, and they are the ones who are suffering. Both boards have said we are sorry about it and all that. But the fans are like, the fans are the stakeholders, and no one has asked them whether they would want a test match or whether they would want a T20, right? But you can see there is an appeal for T20, for Test cricket. Sorry, I'm sorry. There is an appeal for Test cricket and compelling Test cricket, even if it's a one-off test. I mean, personally, I just feel that why can't they just play as part of the series next part of this series, even if there would be a certain few players who will not be part of it, because it's such an extraordinary situation. Why don't you play that and you have the same level of points and then you play it at the same venue? If you can create that sort of, I mean, obviously you'll have to play at Old Trafford, otherwise they will, Lancashire will be very offended in case they play somewhere else. Yeah, I mean, that's the bigger question to me, that has anyone thought about the fans? Or you're just making those decisions purely on a monetary basis?
But it's a weird kind of concept to get your head around, that it doesn't feel like it would work to be part of the same series if it's a year later. It's not the same series. It's like the grandfather's axe, with 3 new axe heads and 4 new axe handles. It's not the same thing a year later because it's a different time. The players are at different stages in their careers. It is something else.
True, but it's a one-off, right? It's not going to happen. This is not a common occurrence. I'm just saying that because after such a nice series, it might just somehow, even if it feels really, it is a situation that has, I don't know. I mean, you played as a one-off test, no one's going to help, but play it as a test.
I support it for
What would be the vote on this between 3 of us? Would you want T20 or T-Test?
Well, I think I support it on a couple of grounds, the idea as it's been portrayed. One is that it's unusual, so we can kind of get around the idea of an unusual thing happening in cricket. We tend to like that in cricket, unusual occurrences. 2 is that, as you say, Nagraj, the fans have paid for test match tickets. We know that there's a way of transferring those to the next year. That's what happened at the Oval 2 weeks ago. All those tickets were reissued from last year to this year. So logistically, all of the workers who missed out on the chance to come and spend 5 days earning money, it isn't just about the 22 players. There is an industry around it. There's a carnival around it, and you can do that next year. And I think last but not least, and Will McPherson made this point on Twitter, how pissed off would everyone be if Ben Stokes, Jofra Archer, and whoever else who's not playing at the moment comes back and beats India in the 5th Test match. They square the series 2-2. The anger would fuel the world. We wouldn't need to worry about carbon emissions for a couple of years, because you could fuel the planet on the basis of the anger from Indian fans, which would be amusing if nothing else. So I think that.
But that's what I'm saying. That this is a chance opportunity for the players. Ask them, what do they want? Do they want to play a one-off test? Do they want to play this as a continuation? Ask the players, ask Kohli whether he would be willing to do that. I really would want to know his answer. I mean,
but also there's the World Test Championship, right? So the World Test Championship points remain unresolved. Correct. So even if it is a one-off test for the... I mean, you could interpret it as a one-off test match, not count to the series. I'm being facetious about Indian fans being furious, by the way, before you go after me in the YouTube comments. But the point here is that there would be a way of it still counting for World Test Championship points based on the percentage system they implemented before the second cycle, where it is played as a one-off, a la Delhi in 1996, Nagraj.
I don't want to go that far, but I just feel that the thing for me is, what does Kohli want? He wanted to win here, okay? He really was so... On Wednesday, apparently... Were you there at the ground on Wednesday at training at Old Trafford? Apparently, he was bubbling. He was like full of enthusiasm that I'm actually there. Like this, now they have to believe that this Indian team, now we have won. This is one place where we did not win for a long time, and now we're winning here too. Now you got to respect us. And, Kohli wants that sort of, many commentators have said that this has been a legacy tour for him. And yes, it is. He wanted to leave a mark. And he has, despite not doing much with the bat, he has not been very fluent with the bat. He has managed to create a unit that was leading 2-1 going into the final test, which is a unique thing. So yeah, I don't know what I want Kohli to answer that question. And coming back to the confusion quickly, I want to wrap this is that you can see what happened with BCCI yesterday. The top two bosses, what Ganguly says one thing first, saying that this should be a one-off test surely. Sometime later, he corrects himself in another interview apparently and says that this is going to be a continuation of the series. Then you have the BCCI secretary saying that, yes, we have offered to the to ECB 2 T20s and they cannot impose themselves with one test. So you can see the sense of confusion between the two boards. And ECB has said that they've written to ICC, which claim that they have not, nothing has come to us. So even the boards don't know. Forget us trying to resolve. Even the boards don't know what they want. I just get this. I can't understand. That's why I feel that the players, this is an opportunity. Talk, go ahead and talk. Take this forward. Whether they will do that, I don't know. They might be doing it quietly. Maybe Kohli has said it already that I don't want to play this as a one-off test. Maybe he has said it, I want to play it as one-off test because of the points, because of that. That's crucial.
What is your understanding of what the interests of each board would be? Because aside from replacing the match and the money, the broadcast money that they need to put matches on in order to get the money from Sky and all the rest of it, there's also the matter of the insurance for the costs to the ECB from having the cancellation, where if it's a forfeited match, then they can claim their insurance money. If it's a cancelled match due to COVID, they can't claim their insurance money. So the ECB is trying to run the line that because nobody actually had COVID, it's not a COVID cancellation. But it's all about, so the Indian board doesn't want to accept that because they don't want to forfeit. They want to say that the test match wasn't played. How do you see this playing out in terms of who wants what and what the potential variables would be?
I don't think they will take it to that point where both boards are clashing with each other and that will leave bad blood between these are two key players at the ICC board and they want to be unified regardless of their differences. So I don't see this going to the disputes resolutions because then the lawyers will interpret it either way and either it depends how, and the ICC wouldn't want that to happen. So they would mutually agree to something. BCCI will never agree that they have forfeited. That's impossible. That will kind of, the World Test Championship will just fall flat there and then. That if India pulls out, India will say, I'll pull out of this now. Whether they, I'm just being I'm exaggerating the situation, but I just feel that clearly, I don't know about the insurance. I don't want to kind of act as an expert. I really do not know the ECB rules. I've been told that there is no insurance, if I remember correctly. It's only from the fans' perspective. There is an insurance to refund the money, etc., but not as far as the cancellation goes of the test match. So I can't add much, sorry, on that front. Okay.
On the players again, just to kind of do a bit of sitting of the record here, there was some furore on Saturday when some players flew out on private jets back to India. So within 24 hours of the test being cancelled, they were on their flights saying, aha, it's proof all along they didn't want to be here. They were rushing back to the Indian Premier League. They were going to Dubai. They have to quarantine. This is all some giant conspiracy. Can you just unpick that for us? Because I think that's important to set the record straight there. That, yes, it might have looked bad. I accept that it may have looked bad if you wanted to look through that lens. But really, there was a practical element to this. And what point was there, them sitting around in a hotel room till Wednesday anyway?
You could see a sense that by the time the BCCI sent out the release, some might have even boarded the flight, like the Mumbai Indians players. They were already there, right? Like Rohit, Bumrah, Surya were already on board. They had taken the flight. They were the first set of players to land in Abu Dhabi or UAE, and then Kohli and Siraj went. These were the only two charter flights. The rest of the players were flying commercial flights, if my sources are correct. So it is bad. It looks bad as an image. It looks that hours after when you were supposed to be in the field, you're actually flying to the UAE with the IPL in mind. So does that mean that you really didn't want to play at all and you were just focused on IPL? But no, that was not I personally feel that was not their motive. Their thing was like, let's move on, let's go there, isolate ourselves, make sure that this doesn't kind of breach the IPL bubble now. If one of us falls positive while we are isolating, it will at least not have an impact on the IPL. And that was the reason that they had to move fast, because once they've decided that the series is not going forward, they did think about postponing it, right, by a day or two, and that didn't work out too. So if once that you are known that, you have to take that next step, which is to kind of, okay, let's leave the country, let's move on. They didn't feel England is unsafe. I don't think that was the case, right? It is not that England is unsafe. They were moving around the streets, they were having their takeaways, they were sitting around, and I'm sure we've not touched upon the book launch where there were people from outside. I'm guessing I was not there, but hopefully the players were not they were on the one side and the guests were on the other side. So I don't think from Indian players' perspective, England as such as a place was unsafe. It's just that's what it is in this world, that you have to move. Your tournament starts in 9 days' time. At that point, they were looking at it, and I need to isolate for 5 days or 6 days actually in the UAE. And let me do that. Let me just kind of cover up that time instead of, yeah.
Well, it's a story that is going to keep rolling in one way or another, maybe all the way up until the Manchester Test of next year when we do it all again. Maybe it'll get cancelled a second time. That'd be funny. Nagraj Gollapudi, thank you so much for joining The Final Word.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Thanks.